The low, throaty roar of the Lamborghini echoed through the bustling streets of New York City. Behind the wheel sat Christopher Weston, 35 years old, wearing designer sunglasses that complemented his meticulously tailored suit. The scent of his high-end cologne lingered in the air as he navigated the urban chaos with practiced ease. For Christopher, the car wasn't just a vehicle. It was an extension of himself, powerful, commanding, and untouchable. But while the city hummed with energy, Christopher's mind was adrift. Despite his outward success, a self-made billionaire thanks to his groundbreaking tech startup, there was an emptiness within him, a void he refused to acknowledge. His life had become a carousel of wealth and superficial indulgence, devoid of any meaningful connections. Stopping at a red light, he idly scanned the sidewalk, expecting nothing of note. And then he saw them. A woman in her early 30s hurried past, her stride purposeful, leading 4 small children who couldn't have been older than 5. The sight itself wasn't unusual in New York, but something about those children made Christopher's breath hitch. They looked exactly like him. Not just a passing resemblance, these kids were practically his clones, blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and mischievous smiles that mirrored his childhood photos. Christopher's hands tightened on the steering wheel as his pulse quickened. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the purr of the engine. The words on a nearby billboard caught his eye. "The truth finds you when you stop searching." Without a second thought, he made a sharp turn and followed the woman, weaving through traffic as if drawn by an invisible force. His Lamborghini screeched to a halt just ahead of her, and he leaped out, his sunglasses hiding the shock and determination in his eyes. The woman stopped abruptly, startled by the sudden confrontation. Her wary gaze darted to her children, who stared at Christopher with wide, curious eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her voice steady, despite the unease flickering across her face. Christopher removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes so strikingly similar to the children's that it felt like a punch to the gut. "Who is the father of these children?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for evasion. The woman stiffened, instinctively pulling her children closer. "That's none of your business." "Oh, it is very much my business," Christopher countered, his voice low but intense. He gestured toward the children. "Look at them. They're identical to me. You can't deny it." Her expression faltered for a moment, the truth flickering in her dark brown eyes, before she masked it with defiance. "They don't have a father," she said firmly. "They only have me." Christopher stepped closer, his tone softening but remaining resolute. "I'm not here to hurt you or them. I just need answers. Please?" The woman hesitated, her maternal instincts warring with the undeniable truth standing before her. Finally she spoke, her voice tinged with a reluctant vulnerability. "My name is Jamie Rivera, and no, I've never met you before." Her words were like a cold splash of water, yet they didn't dispel the connection Christopher felt. He racked his brain trying to make sense of the impossible. Then, like a forgotten memory surfacing, the pieces began to fall into place. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Were you at Glenhaven Fertility Clinic about 5 years ago?" Jamie froze, the color draining from her face. Her lips parted as if to deny it, but no words came out. The memory was there, raw and undeniable. She stammered, her voice cracking. "Yes, I was." The world seemed to tilt under Christopher's feet. Years ago, when his startup was struggling and his future uncertain, he had made a decision he rarely thought about. For quick cash, he had anonymously donated to a high-end fertility clinic, assured his contributions would go to a single recipient under strict confidentiality. Now, standing before him, were 4 living, breathing reminders of that impulsive choice. "They're mine," Christopher said, the realization hitting him like a freight train. Jamie's shoulders sagged under the weight of the truth, her expression a mix of fear, anger, and heartbreak. "They're mine," Christopher repeated, more to himself than to her. Jamie squared her shoulders, her protective instincts kicking in. "You don't have any right to them? They're my children. I've raised them on my own, without anyone's help, especially yours." Christopher didn't argue. Instead, he took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Jamie, I'm not here to take them away from you, but this changes everything." Jamie's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Her life had been built on the foundation of independence and resilience. Now the man who unknowingly fathered her children was standing in front of her, threatening to upend everything. Before she could respond, Christopher gestured to his car. "Please, get in, you and the kids. We need to talk, and this isn't the place." Jamie hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to walk away. But something in Christopher's eyes, a mix of determination and vulnerability, made her pause. Finally, she nodded, gathering her children, and leading them into the sleek car that seemed as out of place in their lives as its owner. As the Lamborghini sped through the streets, the city blurred around them. Inside, the tension was palpable, a storm of questions and emotions waiting to erupt. And for the first time in his life, Christopher Weston felt something other than power and control. He felt the weight of responsibility. The Lamborghini pulled into a quiet, upscale neighborhood, its engine rumbling to a stop in front of an imposing townhouse with sleek, modern architecture. Christopher turned off the ignition but didn't move, his hands resting on the steering wheel as he struggled to find the right words. Jamie sat beside him, her posture rigid, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. In the back seat, the children had settled into a bubble of innocent curiosity, whispering and giggling at the novelty of the car's luxurious interior. Jamie broke the silence. "Why did you bring us here?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Christopher finally looked at her, his expression a mix of guilt and determination. "I needed to take you somewhere safe, somewhere private." Jamie narrowed her eyes. "Safe? From what? You think I can't protect my own children?" Her words stung, but Christopher didn't flinch. "That's not what I meant. Look, there's a lot to figure out, and we can't do it in the middle of the street." Jamie's gaze didn't soften, but she nodded. "Fine. Let's get this over with." Christopher opened the car door and stepped out, his movements careful, as if he were navigating a minefield. Jamie followed, ushering her children out and watching them like a hawk as they gawked at the manicured lawn and pristine driveway. "Stay close, guys," she said, her voice firm but gentle. Christopher led them inside, the door opening to reveal a spacious living room bathed in soft light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of a serene garden, while the minimalist decor exuded quiet elegance. The children darted around, their giggles echoing through the space as they marveled at the unfamiliar surroundings. Jamie, meanwhile, stood near the entrance, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on Christopher. "Talk," she demanded. Christopher ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a man trying to organize his thoughts. Finally, he stopped and turned to face her. "I need you to know something," he began, his voice measured but tinged with vulnerability. "I didn't know about them, about you." Jamie's lips tightened. "I figured that much out already." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Years ago, I was in a tough spot. My company wasn't making money yet, and I was barely getting by. One day, I saw an ad for the Glen Haven Fertility Clinic. They paid donors well, and He hesitated, shame flickering across his face. "I needed the money." Jamie's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "They promised me everything would be anonymous, that my donation would only be used once, for one family. I never thought it would lead to this." His gaze shifted to the children, who were now investigating a large glass coffee table with the curiosity only toddlers could muster. Jamie followed his gaze, her expression softening for a moment before she turned back to him. "And now that you know what? You think you can just walk into our lives and play father?" Her words hit like a slap, but Christopher didn't back down. "I don't know what I'm thinking," he admitted. "All I know is that I can't walk away. Not now. Not after this." Jamie's eyes flashed with anger. "You don't get to make that decision. These kids have a life, a good life without you. I've worked my ass off to give them that, and I won't let anyone, not even you, disrupt it." Christopher stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to take anything away from you, Jamie. I see how much they mean to you, but they're my kids too, whether any of us planned for this or not." Jamie opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, one of the children, Olivia, the boldest of the four, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, can we play outside?" she asked, her bright eyes filled with excitement. Jamie hesitated, torn between keeping her children close and giving them the freedom they rarely got in their cramped apartment. Finally, she sighed. "Okay, but stay where I can see you." The kids squealed with delight and bolted for the garden, their laughter spilling into the air as they explored the manicured hedges and stone pathways. Jamie watched them for a moment before turning back to Christopher, her expression hardening once more. "You're not just some stranger to them now. Do you realize what that means?" Christopher nodded slowly. "I do, and I know this won't be easy for any of us, but I want to try." Jamie shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Try what? You don't know the first thing about being a parent, and honestly, I don't think you're ready for what that means." "I'm willing to learn," he said simply. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of insincerity. She didn't find one, but that didn't ease the weight pressing down on her chest. "This isn't just about you or me," she said quietly. "It's about them, and I won't let anyone, no matter how rich or well-meaning, hurt them." Christopher nodded, his expression somber. "I understand, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you and to them that I'm here for the right reasons." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. For the first time, Jamie saw a flicker of something in Christopher's eyes, something real, responsibility. In the garden, the children's laughter continued to fill the air, a reminder of what was at stake. For both of them, the path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their lives would never be the same. As the children played outside, their carefree laughter echoing through the property, Jamie and Christopher stood in the sleek, modern kitchen. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also an undercurrent of something else, something unspoken. Christopher poured 2 glasses of water, sliding one across the counter to Jamie. She hesitated before picking it up, her fingers curling around the glass as she studied him. "You still haven't answered the most important question," she said finally. He met her gaze. "Which is? Why now? Why couldn't you just let us go?" Christopher exhaled slowly, leaning against the counter. "Because I can't unsee it, Jamie. The moment I looked at them, it was like seeing a part of myself I didn't even know was missing. I've spent my entire life chasing success, thinking it would fill the void. But now—" He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Now I realize that maybe what I've been searching for isn't something money can buy." Jamie's expression softened for a moment before she quickly steeled herself again. "That's a nice sentiment, but it's not enough. Being a parent isn't about some existential epiphany. It's about showing up every single day, no matter how hard it gets. Do you think you're ready for that?" Christopher didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out the window at the children, their energy boundless as they chased each other around the garden. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I want to try, and I think I deserve the chance to figure it out." Jamie sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "It's not just about you, Christopher. It's about them. They don't know who you are. They've never needed a father before. How do you expect them to handle this?" He nodded, his expression serious. "You're right, and I'm not going to force anything, but I want to be in their lives, on your terms if that's what it takes." Jamie studied him for a long moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. Finally, she set her glass down and crossed her arms. "Okay," she said. Christopher blinked, surprised. "Okay? I'm not saying I trust you," she clarified quickly. "But if you're serious about this, we'll start slow. visits, conversations, and if I see even a hint that this is too much for you, or worse, that it's hurting them, it's over. No second chances." He nodded solemnly. "Agreed." Jamie turned to look out the window, watching her children with a mixture of pride and worry. "They're my whole world, Christopher. If you want to be a part of their lives, you'd better mean it." "I do," he said, his voice steady. For the first time since they met, Jamie allowed herself to believe him, just a little. Over the next few weeks, Christopher began to integrate himself into the children's lives. It wasn't easy. The kids were wary at first, unsure what to make of the tall, serious man who showed up with expensive toys and an awkward smile. Jamie insisted on being present for every interaction, keeping a close eye on Christopher as he navigated the uncharted waters of fatherhood. At first, his attempts were clumsy. He struggled to connect with the kids, who were used to Jamie's warm, hands-on parenting style, but little by little, he found his footing. He read bedtime stories, even when he stumbled over the voices. He joined in on games of tag, despite being woefully out of shape. And he listened, really listened, when they talked about their favorite cartoons or their dreams of becoming astronauts and ballerinas. One evening, as Christopher helped the children build a towering Lego castle in Jamie's modest apartment, she watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. "You're getting better at this," she admitted grudgingly. Christopher glanced up, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "High praise coming from you." "Don't let it go to your head," she said, though her tone was softer than usual. He chuckled, turning back to the castle just as one of the kids knocked a piece loose. "Hey, careful! Structural integrity is key." The children giggled, and Jamie couldn't help but smile. One night, after the kids were asleep, Christopher stayed behind to talk to Jamie. They sat in the small living room, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence as they sipped tea. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked quietly. Jamie shrugged, staring into her cup. "Because I saw something in you, something I didn't expect." "What's that?" She met his gaze. "You care. Even if you're new to all of this, even if you're not perfect, you care. And that matters more than you realize." Christopher leaned back, her words sinking in. "I never thought I'd end up here, being a father, sitting in a cozy apartment, drinking tea with a woman who's smarter and stronger than anyone I've ever met." Jamie raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Flattery won't get you anywhere." "It's not flattery," he said, his tone serious. "It's the truth." Jamie looked away, her cheeks warming despite herself. For the first time, the walls between them felt a little less insurmountable. As the months went on, Christopher and Jamie found themselves navigating an uncharted territory between co-parenting and friendship. There were arguments, of course, moments when Jamie's protectiveness clashed with Christopher's impulsiveness. But there were also moments of understanding, of shared laughter and quiet conversations late at night. The children began to embrace Christopher as a part of their lives, their initial hesitation giving way to affection. They still called him Mr. Christopher, but the way they ran to him when he arrived spoke volumes. For Christopher, the experience was transformative. He found himself changing in ways he never expected, his once empty life filling with purpose and love. And for Jamie, it was a reminder that even the most unexpected paths could lead to something beautiful. They didn't have all the answers, and their journey was far from over. But together they were building something real, something worth fighting for. The rhythm of their new life together wasn't without its disruptions. As Christopher became more involved in the children's lives, so too did the weight of his past loom over him. One crisp autumn afternoon, Christopher invited Jamie and the kids to visit his childhood estate, a sprawling property upstate where he had grown up under the shadow of his father's ambition. The estate was now unused, a hollow echo of the power his family once wielded. The children were thrilled, their excitement bubbling over as they explored the grounds. Jamie, however, couldn't shake a sense of unease. "Why are we here?" she asked Christopher as they stood on the steps of the grand but weathered manor. Christopher's gaze was distant, fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped below the trees. "Because this is where it all started. My drive to succeed, my obsession with control. I thought if I showed you this place, it might help you understand why I am the way I am." Jamie folded her arms, skeptical. "And why do you think I need to understand that?" "Because if we're going to figure us out, you need to know the whole story," Christopher said, his voice quieter now. Jamie arched a brow. "Us? Last I checked, there wasn't an us, Weston." Christopher smirked faintly, but there was no humor in his eyes. "Fair enough, but these kids, they're a part of both of us now. That means our pasts, no matter how messy, matter." She studied him, her skepticism softening into curiosity. "So, what's the story?" Christopher sighed and gestured for her to follow. They walked through the manor's dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing off the marble floors. In a quiet sitting room, lined with dusty shelves and faded portraits, Christopher stopped before an old piano. He ran a hand over its keys, the faint notes reverberating through the space like ghosts of a forgotten melody. "My father built this place," he began, his voice low. "He was a titan in the finance world, ruthless, brilliant, and completely absent. My mother tried to balance it out, but she was more interested in keeping up appearances than actually parenting. By the time I was 10, I'd learned that love was transactional and that you had to earn your worth." Jamie listened intently, leaning against the doorframe. She didn't interrupt, sensing the weight of what he was revealing. "I spent my whole life trying to prove something, to him, to the world, to myself. It didn't matter what I had to sacrifice, as long as I could call it a win. But in the end, none of it filled the emptiness. I didn't realize how far I'd drifted until—" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Until I saw them. Until I saw you." Jamie's breath caught in her throat, but she quickly masked her reaction. "That's a nice story, Weston. But what's your point?" He turned to face her, his expression unguarded in a way she wasn't used to. "My point is, I don't want to be my father. I don't want my kids to grow up thinking success is the only thing that matters. I want to give them something I never had, a real family." Jamie looked away, her emotions swirling too quickly for her to pin down. "And what does that look like to you?" she asked, her voice softer now. Christopher shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to figure it out, with you." The visit to the estate marked a turning point. Over the following weeks, Christopher and Jamie began to let their walls down, not all at once, but piece by piece. Christopher continued to show up, not just for the children, but for Jamie as well. He helped with school pickups, made dinner when Jamie worked late, and even learned to braid hair for Olivia's ballet recital. Jamie, in turn, began to trust him. She saw how the children lit up around him, how he listened to them and learned from his mistakes. She saw his effort, his vulnerability, and the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. One night, after the kids were in bed, they found themselves sitting on the couch together, a bottle of wine between them. "You've changed," Jamie said, breaking the comfortable silence. Christopher tilted his head. "I'd like to think so." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, really changed. When we first met, you were— well, let's just say I wasn't impressed." He laughed, a genuine, warm sound that caught her off guard. "Fair enough, I wasn't exactly at my best." Jamie smirked, but her expression quickly turned serious. "So what happens now?" Christopher's smile faded and he set his glass down. "That depends on you, Jamie. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm here, for them, for you, if you'll let me." She looked at him, her heart battling her head. She'd spent so long building a life on her own, guarding her heart against disappointment. But as she gazed at the man sitting beside her, the man who had fought to prove himself not with words, but with actions, she wondered if it was time to take a leap of faith. "I guess we'll see," she said finally, a small smile tugging at her lips. Christopher nodded, his own smile soft but hopeful. "I'll take that." Their journey wasn't perfect. There were missteps and misunderstandings, moments of doubt and frustration, but there were also moments of joy, family movie nights, shared breakfasts, and the simple, unspoken bond that began to grow between them. For Jamie, it was a lesson in trust. For Christopher, it was a lesson in love, and for the children, it was the beginning of a story they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Together they were building something fragile yet strong, something imperfect yet beautiful. And for the first time in years, both Jamie and Christopher felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. The soft voice came from a woman in her 80s, her white hair framing a face etched with the marks of a life fully lived. She sat propped against the pillows of an antique bed, her body frail but her presence commanding. Her eyes, clouded by age, carried a depth that seemed to pierce through time itself. Christopher stepped closer, and his entire demeanor shifted. The confidence and authority that usually surrounded him like an impenetrable shield melted away, replaced by an unfamiliar tenderness that caught Jamie off guard. "She's my grandmother," he whispered to Jamie, his voice subdued. "She raised me when my parents couldn't." The room fell into a hushed silence, heavy with emotions that hung unspoken in the air. Jamie stood back, sensing that what she was about to witness was deeply personal, a part of Christopher that few, if any, had ever seen. Christopher moved to the side of the bed and took his grandmother's hand, his touch gentle. His voice, so often commanding and sure, now trembled with vulnerability. "Grandma," he began, his throat tightening, "I couldn't let you leave this world without seeing your greatest wish fulfilled." Her cloudy eyes opened wider at his words, her expression softening as she waited for him to continue. "I didn't just bring you one great-grandchild," Christopher said, his voice breaking slightly. "I brought you 4. Her breath hitched, and a single tear traced the lines of her weathered cheek. The power of the moment froze time itself. "4?" she whispered, her voice trembling as she tried to process his words. "My great-grandchildren?" Christopher nodded, his own hands shaking as they clasped hers. Jamie, who had been standing quietly at the edge of the room, felt drawn toward the elderly woman. She knelt by the bed and gently took the woman's other hand. "Yes, ma'am," Jamie said softly, her voice infused with genuine warmth. "They're your great-grandchildren. They came into this world surrounded by love and have been the light of my life. And now they're part of yours too." The grandmother's lips trembled into a smile, her grip tightening ever so slightly around their hands. "Child of my soul," she whispered, her words carrying the weight of a lifetime. "The life you've sown into this family is a gift beyond measure. I don't know how fate brought these children to you, but I see in your eyes a love so pure it could only have been destined. You have been the river that brought new life to this home, and in their laughter, the universe's gratitude is written." Jamie's eyes welled with tears, but she smiled through them, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. A connection had formed between her and the elderly woman, one that transcended bloodlines. Christopher, still holding his grandmother's hand, watched in silence, his expression softening in a way that Jamie had never seen before. His heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth as he realized that, for the first time, he felt truly at peace. At the door, the 4 children peeked in, curiosity lighting their identical faces. When they saw their father kneeling by the bed, they scampered inside, their giggles filling the room. "Come here," Christopher said, his voice full of affection. The children climbed onto the bed, their small hands reaching out to touch their great-grandmother's. She smiled as they surrounded her, her frail body encircled by their youthful energy. "Now I can go in peace," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She turned her eyes toward Christopher, her gaze piercing through the fog of her condition. "Because I see you've finally found what truly matters." Jamie, overwhelmed by the depth of the moment, leaned forward and kissed the grandmother's hand, silently promising to honor the love and family that now connected them all. Later that evening, as the children slept soundly in one of the mansion's many guest rooms, Jamie and Christopher sat together in the grand living room. The room was quiet except for the crackling of the fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the high ceilings. Jamie looked around, taking in the opulence of her surroundings. It was a stark contrast to the life she had built, and though she was grateful for Christopher's generosity, she felt out of place. "This mansion has plenty of space," Christopher said suddenly, breaking the silence. His tone was calm, but tinged with hope. "You don't have to go back to that tiny apartment. Stay here, at least for now." Jamie hesitated, her instinct to refuse clashing with the sincerity in his eyes. "I appreciate the offer, Christopher, but material comfort isn't what makes a home." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "but this isn't just about comfort. I want you and the kids to be safe and happy, and I want you here because—" He trailed off, searching for the right words. "Because?" Jamie prompted gently. "Because this place feels like home for the first time in years," he admitted, "and that's because of you." Jamie's breath caught, her heart wavering, as she searched his face for the truth. And she found it there, plain and unguarded. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. Christopher smiled, relief washing over him. "That's all I ask." The next morning, sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating the house with a golden glow. Christopher had planned a day out for Jamie and the children, determined to show them a side of life filled with joy and new experiences. Their first stop was an upscale boutique in Manhattan where the children marveled at the brightly colored clothes and soft fabrics. Jamie watched as Christopher helped them pick out outfits, his patience and care evident in every interaction. From there, they went to a high-end restaurant where laughter echoed as the children shared stories and played games between bites of their meals. "See?" Jamie said to Christopher as she watched the children giggle. "It's not the fancy things that make this day special. It's moments like these." Christopher nodded, his gaze fixed on her. "You're right. For a long time I thought material success was everything, but now I know it's moments like these that truly matter." The day continued with a visit to a nearby park, where the children's laughter filled the air as they played on swings, slides, and carousels. They ended the afternoon at an ice cream parlor, where they shared giant sundaes and exchanged warm smiles. When they returned to the mansion that evening, the air was light with the day's happiness. But as they entered the grand foyer, a figure stood waiting for them, a woman with an elegant posture and a piercing gaze. She wore a luxurious fur coat and sparkling jewelry, her polished appearance commanding attention. Christopher froze, his expression hardening as he recognized her. "Who is this?" Jamie asked, sensing the tension in the air. The woman stepped forward with a confident smile, her eyes flicking between Jamie and the children. "Let me introduce myself," she said smoothly. "I'm Emilia Mendez-Ortiz, and I'm Christopher's fiancée." The room seemed to freeze, and Christopher's heart stopped. Christopher's eyes widened, his breath caught in his chest, as Emilia's words echoed through the grand foyer. The children, still holding hands and laughing from their day of adventures, fell silent, sensing the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. Jamie turned to Christopher, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Fiancé?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Emilia smirked, stepping closer. "Yes, darling," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "He's probably too overwhelmed to explain. Christopher and I have been together for over a year. We've been planning to marry for months." "That's not true," Christopher interjected, his voice firm, though a flicker of guilt crossed his face. Emilia ignored him, her sharp gaze landing on Jamie. "And who, may I ask, are you? And these children?" Jamie squared her shoulders, her protective instincts igniting as she pulled the children closer. "I'm Jamie Rivera, and these are my children." She glanced at Christopher, her tone pointed, as she added, "Our children." The impact of her words hit Amelia like a slap. Her perfectly composed face faltered, and for a moment she stared at the children, their resemblance to Christopher undeniable. "Your children?" Amelia repeated, her voice rising with incredulity. "What kind of ridiculous joke is this? Christopher, explain yourself," Christopher sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not a joke, Amelia," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "These are my children. I didn't know about them until recently, but now they're part of my life, and so is Jamie." Amelia's composure cracked further, and she let out a cold laugh. "Part of your life? Are you seriously trying to tell me that you've suddenly decided to play house with them?" She gestured disdainfully at Jamie and the children. "You're Christopher Weston. You don't do commitments, let alone to someone like—" "Enough!" Christopher's voice boomed, silencing Amelia mid-sentence. He stepped forward, his expression hardening as he locked eyes with her. "I won't let you insult Jamie or my children. You need to leave. Now." Jamie, who had remained calm until now, gently placed her hands on the shoulders of her children, who were clinging to her tightly. She spoke evenly, her voice steady but firm. "Amelia, I understand that this is a shock for you," Jamie began, meeting Amelia's cold gaze. "But the value of a person isn't measured by their wealth or status. It's measured by their heart and the love they give. Maybe one day you'll understand that." Amelia scoffed, her face twisting in anger. "How dare you lecture me?" she hissed. "You don't know anything about me or what Christopher and I have." Jamie's expression didn't waver. "What you have, or think you have, is between you and him. My priority is my children, and I won't let anyone, including you, disrupt their happiness." Before Amelia could respond, a sound broke through the tension, the steady creak of a walker against the polished floor. Everyone turned to see Christopher's grandmother entering the room, her frail frame upright with determination. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp despite its weakness. Her eyes darted between Amelia, Jamie, and Christopher, before settling on the children, who were huddled together near Jamie's side. "Grandma," Christopher began, his tone softening, "it's not what it looks like." "Amelia, let me stop you right there," the grandmother interrupted, raising a trembling hand. She turned her piercing gaze on Amelia. "I know exactly what's happening, and I won't stand for it." Amelia flinched but quickly recovered, plastering a strained smile on her face. "Mrs. Weston, it's lovely to see you. I was just explaining to Christopher that—" "You will not marry my grandson," the grandmother said bluntly, cutting her off. Amelia's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," the grandmother continued. "I may be old, but I'm not blind or deaf. I see what's in your heart, and it's nothing but ambition and greed." Amelia's face reddened, and she sputtered, "You can't speak to me that way." "Oh, but I can," the grandmother said, her voice unwavering. She turned to Christopher, her expression softening. "My dear boy, you've spent your life chasing the wrong things. But now you have a chance to choose what truly matters." Her gaze shifted to Jamie and the children, and she smiled. "They are what matters." Amelia, realizing she was losing her grip on the situation, reached into her designer handbag and pulled out an envelope. She thrust it toward Christopher. "You think you can just walk away from me?" she snapped. "I'm carrying your children, triplets." Christopher stared at the envelope, his face pale. Slowly he opened it and pulled out the ultrasound photo inside. "This can't be," he muttered, his voice shaky. "Oh, but it is," Amelia said triumphantly, her smirk returning. "You'll see. We're meant to be together." The grandmother stepped forward, her frail frame seeming to carry an unshakable authority. "Amelia," she said, her tone icy, "you forget one thing." "And what's that?" Amelia asked, her confidence faltering. "Christopher can't have children," the grandmother declared. The room fell into stunned silence. Christopher's eyes widened as he stared at his grandmother. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 years ago," she said gently, You underwent surgery for a condition that required a vasectomy. You made that choice, Christopher. I know because I spoke with your doctors myself." Amelia's face turned ashen, and she shook her head. "That's a lie!" she screamed. "He's lying!" "I have no reason to lie," the grandmother said calmly. "The truth is clear. Those babies are not Christopher's." Christopher's mind raced as the weight of his grandmother's words sank in. He looked at Amelia, his expression shifting from disbelief to anger. "Is it true?" he demanded. Amelia faltered, her confidence crumbling under his glare. Finally she snapped, "Fine, they're not yours. But does it matter? You're the only man who could give me the life I deserve." Christopher's face hardened. "Get out," he said coldly. As Amelia stormed out, the tension in the room dissolved. Christopher turned to Jamie, his eyes filled with emotion. "I've made so many mistakes," he said quietly. "But if you'll give me the chance, I want to be the man you and the children deserve." Jamie studied him for a long moment before nodding. "We'll take it one step at a time," she said. The grandmother smiled, her heart full, as the children ran to Christopher, wrapping their arms around him. For the first time, the mansion felt alive with love and the promise of a new future. And as the family began to rebuild together, Christopher realized he had found the greatest treasure of all. The days following Amelia's dramatic departure were a whirlwind of emotions for everyone. Christopher, humbled by the revelations and the weight of his past decisions, committed himself fully to the family he now realized he couldn't live without. For Jamie, it was a cautious journey of learning to trust him step by step. The children were blissfully unaware of the complexities swirling around them. To them, life had become an adventure, a sprawling mansion to explore, a doting great-grandmother who told enchanting stories, and a father who seemed to be learning the ropes of parenthood with each passing day. One afternoon, Christopher sat on the patio overlooking the estate's lush gardens. Jamie joined him, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one down in front of him and took a seat beside him, the warm sunlight filtering through the trees, casting a golden glow over their quiet moment. "Thank you," he said, wrapping his hands around the cup. Jamie glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "You've been quieter lately," she observed. He nodded, taking a sip before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot," he admitted, "about how much I've missed, how much I've taken for granted, and about what I need to do to be better for you and the kids." Jamie tilted her head, studying him. "You're already trying. That counts for something." He smiled faintly. "Trying isn't enough. I want to prove to you, and to them, that I'm here for the long haul. No more running, no more excuses." Jamie leaned back, her eyes on the garden where the children were chasing each other through the grass. "They're resilient, you know," she said softly. "They'll forgive you if you make mistakes. What matters is that you're here now." "And you?" he asked, turning to her. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "That's a little more complicated," she admitted, "but I'm willing to see where this goes." Christopher reached out, covering her hand with his. "That's all I can ask." Over the weeks, Christopher's mansion transformed into a bustling home filled with warmth and laughter. The children quickly settled into their new routines, their natural exuberance bringing life to every corner of the house. Christopher made a point of being present, something he'd never prioritized before. He read bedtime stories, learned the rules of their favorite games, and even tackled the chaos of helping them with their school projects. One evening, as he attempted to help Zahara assemble a diorama of a volcano, Jamie leaned against the doorway, watching with a bemused smile. "You know," she said, crossing her arms, "I don't think you were meant for arts and crafts." Christopher looked up, his face smudged with glue. "You could have warned me before I volunteered for this," he quipped. "I thought you could use the challenge," she teased, stepping into the room to lend a hand. The two worked together, their shared laughter filling the room as they completed the project. Zahara beamed with pride, declaring it the best volcano in her class. One afternoon, Christopher's grandmother called him into her sitting room. She was seated by the window, a book in her lap, her gaze distant, as she watched the children playing outside. "You've come a long way, my boy," she said as Christopher took a seat beside her. He nodded. "Thanks to you, and Jamie." She reached out, patting his hand. "Don't waste this opportunity, Christopher. Family is a gift, not a given. You've seen what happens when people chase the wrong things. Promise me you'll choose differently." "I promise," he said, his voice firm. Her eyes sparkled with pride. "Good. Now go out there and show those children what kind of father you can be." To mark their new beginning, Christopher and Jamie decided to host a small gathering for family and close friends. The mansion was filled with the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the sound of children's laughter. Christopher stood to give a toast, his voice steady as he addressed the group. "This family has taught me more in a few months than I've learned in my entire life," he began. "They've shown me what love really means, and they've given me a chance to be the person I've always wanted to be." He turned to Jamie, his voice softening. "Jamie, you've shown me grace and strength when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for believing in me, even when it wasn't easy." Jamie's eyes glistened as she smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "And to my children," Christopher continued, his voice breaking slightly, "you are my greatest joy and the reason I want to be better every day. Thank you for letting me be your dad." The room erupted in applause, but for Christopher, the only thing that mattered was the warmth of Jamie's hand slipping into his and the bright smiles of his children beaming up at him. As the party wound down, Christopher and Jamie sat together on the patio, the children dozing on a nearby couch. The stars twinkled overhead, casting a serene glow over the scene. "What now?" Jamie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Christopher turned to her, his gaze steady. "Now we keep building this life together, one day at a time." Jamie nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I think we can do that." As they sat in the quiet of the night, their hearts full, Christopher and Jamie knew they had found something extraordinary, something worth holding on to. Their journey was far from over, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. The weeks turned into months, and the once fractured lives of Christopher, Jamie, and the children began to interweave into something whole and vibrant. The mansion was no longer a symbol of isolation. It had transformed into a home where laughter echoed in every hall and love filled every corner. On a warm spring evening, Christopher led Jamie to the garden, where lanterns hung from the trees and soft music played in the background. The children, in on the secret, peeked from behind the curtains of the mansion, giggling with excitement. Jamie looked around, her brow furrowing in curiosity. "What's all this?" Christopher smiled, his nerves hidden behind the calm resolve he'd discovered since Jamie and the children entered his life. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Before Jamie could ask what he meant, Christopher dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Jamie," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "From the moment you walked into my life, everything changed. You showed me what it means to truly care, to love, and to be loved. You and the kids are my family, my everything. I can't imagine another day without you by my side." Tears welled in Jamie's eyes as Christopher opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. Jamie's lips trembled as she nodded, a smile breaking through her tears. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cheers erupted from the mansion as the children burst out, running toward them. They surrounded their parents, laughing and hugging, their joy as radiant as the sunset painting the sky. Months later, under a canopy of blooming wisteria in the mansion's garden, Christopher and Jamie exchanged vows. The ceremony was intimate, attended by close friends, family, and Christopher's grandmother, who beamed with pride as she watched her grandson pledge his love and commitment. Jamie wore a gown as simple and graceful as she was, while Christopher stood tall, his eyes never leaving hers. The children played the roles of flower girls and ring bearers, their laughter and excitement adding a special magic to the day. "I promise to love you, to honor you, and to support you in all that you do," Christopher said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "You've given me a family, a home, and a reason to be the best version of myself. For that, I am forever grateful." Jamie smiled, her heart overflowing. "I promise to stand by you, to believe in you, and to share this beautiful life we've built together. You are my partner, my love, and my home." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the garden erupted in applause and cheers. Christopher and Jamie shared a kiss, sealing their vows and beginning their new chapter as a family united in love. As the years passed, the Weston family continued to grow, not in size, but in strength and connection. The mansion became a place of celebration and warmth, where every milestone was marked with laughter and every setback met with resilience. Christopher, once consumed by ambition and material success, found his greatest joy in the small, everyday moments, helping with homework, cheering at soccer games, and sharing quiet evenings with Jamie after the children had gone to bed. Jamie, whose journey had been one of courage and determination, blossomed in the love and support of the family she had built. She found new opportunities to pursue her passions, with Christopher always cheering her on. The children, surrounded by love and stability, grew into kind, confident individuals, carrying with them the lessons of compassion and strength that their parents had taught them. And through it all, Christopher's grandmother remained the heart of the family, her wisdom and love a guiding light for everyone. One evening, years later, Christopher and Jamie sat on the same patio where they had first talked about rebuilding their lives together. The children, now older, laughed and chatted inside the house, their voices a comforting backdrop to the peaceful night. Christopher reached for Jamie's hand, his grip firm yet gentle. "I never thought I'd have this," he said quietly. Jamie smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Neither did I. But I'm glad we found it together." He pressed a kiss to her temple, his heart full of gratitude. "You saved me, Jamie, you and the kids. You gave me a life worth living." "And you gave us a home," she replied, her voice soft. "A family. That's all we ever wanted." As they sat together under the stars, their love stronger than ever, Christopher and Jamie knew that their journey, though not without its challenges, had led them exactly where they were meant to be, a life rich not in possessions, but in love, laughter, and the unbreakable bonds of family. And so their story didn't end. It simply continued, one beautiful day at a time, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the courage to build something extraordinary together. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what love means to you, and stay tuned for more tales that remind us of the beauty in life's unexpected turns.